Hello, this is Kryptonite Dragon. Welcome to another episode of the PodStation. Joining us today will be a special guest. More about that in a minute. First, let me start off by giving you the normal site roundup news. First on the agenda is the chat room we've just added. I want to tell everybody they can go ahead and start using that bad boy. We've put in all the additions and everything that we intend to do right now. It should be functioning. If you're having some browser issues, you might want to check with your Java, making sure all that's turned on, they're not blocking anything, and that you have the latest updates. There's a couple of browsers out there that are particularly troublesome, but just keep trying. There is help around the internet. If you get an error code, I recommend sticking that back in Google, and you should be able to find out what you can do. Pretty much everything else is going well around the site. I think we're going to have some new additions to the graphics team and everything like that, but I won't prematurely announce that until it's official. But we're moving along, and we're working on a lot of other things in the background. And you might see some advertisements pop back up. We are going to do the non-intrusive advertising, but that is something that will be coming back around. We look forward to some other big updates coming very soon. So,
can I just chip in with the chat thing? If anyone's listening to the podcast live, we are now actually in the chat as we broadcast live. So if anyone wants to messages or chat to us while we're doing it, they can do it on the Twitch, but they can also now do it on our own site as well. So I'll be monitoring that throughout the show, so if anyone wants to get involved and have a discussion with us, and we can incorporate that into the show.
And we did just think about that just recently.
Yeah, like super recently, but yeah, do get in the chat room on TrophiesonPSN.com and come and have a chat with us while we do this live. So be interesting to see what some of people think about this week's topic. So,
and we'll continue to do that unless we encounter any problems with streaming.
Yes.
But for now, yes, great idea. Smart man. Okay, so I've been told I also have to earn my money this week, and so I have come up with a PSN pick of the week. I don't know what Dante was doing, probably playing video games. Didn't do his work. So, my pick this week is one of a few games I've played recently that is actually very, very good. It's a game called Warp. It came out in 2012, and it's an oldie but a goodie. It's something that I really like. It's a pretty cool game, Dante. You play a little alien in it. You're in an underground structure facility that's under the ocean, and you're kind of like you awaken and find out that you've been kind of kidnapped by a group of scientists, and your job is to figure out how to escape. As you go along, you start discovering that you have special powers. The ability to warp around, which is you can pass through walls and stuff like this.
So how does the gameplay mechanic work with that?
Well, it's kind of a 3D game, but it's more of a top-down kind of thing, and it's a little bit of a puzzle game more than it's an action game. It's listed a lot of places as an action first in the genre, but it's really a puzzle game. You got to figure out how to get special food. There's like these glowing alien gummy worms almost. Little gummy bears, and you increase your force powers, your little abilities to go through walls and whatnot. So it's actually got a high rating too, if I'm not mistaken. It's a mature rating because you actually can jump inside of humans, inside of scientists and guards, and shake your stick and blow them up as you jump out of their body. You explode them into a pile of goo. So it's not probably not kid-friendly for some of you that want to limit the younger ones playing it, but it's definitely a fun game. It can be challenging. There's certain levels that you've got to beat little timed areas to get extra sources of these these alien food, and grubs, I think they call them in the game. And so some of these little puzzle levels you got to do really, really fast, and I haven't figured out how to do some of them very, very fast yet. But as you go, you can kind of rank up your powers and do more and more things, warp faster, and things like that. Pretty cool little game.
It eases you into it nicely then.
Yeah, it starts you off, you're just kind of like learning to walk around, and the scientists are playing with you, like giving you little tests. So it does break you in pretty easy, and then it gets to, it gets to a little bit harder as you go along, but Definitely a fun game. Definitely a fun game. I picked it
It's
up
just,
when they had the sale on. Was that last week? Week before last, where it was
yeah,
$5 for on sale from
yeah.
PSN users, and then PS Plus was only a couple bucks or something like that. So it's
Yeah.
even
So,
discounted pretty cheaply right now.
what would it be normally? Something like 10, $15 or something like that?
Yeah, I think maybe $9.95, something like that, in the U.S.
Yeah.
store.
Well, I'm glad you told us a bit more about it, because as I was saying before we came live on air, that for those that have watched that movie that I mentioned a few shows ago, Indie Game the movie, there's a part in it where they're doing an interview with the guy who created Fez, and in the background you can actually see all the posters and stuff for Warp at PAX. So it's
Cool.
a game that obviously people have seen, but personally, as I say, I mean, I was aware of Warp, but I just didn't even know what it was about. I'd seen the logo and like stuff like that, but I hadn't actually delved into it. So it's good to know that there's actually quite a puzzle element to it, and
Yeah,
it's got an
I didn't know what
adult
to
sense of
expect either.
humour.
I took a risk and I bought it, and it's very good. It's developed by Trapdoor, published by EA partners, and it's pretty inexpensive for a lot of fun, a lot of hours of fun. Highly recommend it.
Definitely gonna have to check that out and pick it up at some point.
Cool, cool. You can help me through some of the levels.
Start doing trophy videos for you just to help you out.
There you go. That's what I'm saying.
This week's topic.
So this week's topic is MMOs, whatever that is.
For those that don't know what an MMO is, just playing devil's advocate here, but an MMO is a massively multiplayer online game. And to be honest with you, even though it says massive multiplayer, it usually stems from about 32 players upwards, to where some games have hundreds, if not thousands, of players simultaneously. Now, we thought about bringing up this topic because recently there's been several announcements with new MMOs coming up. You may have seen on the PlayStation Store that Dust 514, which is a first-person shooter MMO, has just gone into open beta, which you can now download from the PSN store.
Tied to EVE Online, another MMO.
Which is,
on PC.
If you're a PC player, then you'll be familiar with EVE. There's also a new game from Trion Worlds called Defiance, which is a third-person shooter MMO, which the player cap runs from anywhere from a couple of hundred to thousands of players at any one time in any one space. And that'll be tied in with the TV
show. Yes.
Talk a little bit more about that over the course of the show. But I hope that gives some people some idea of why we've chosen to pick this topic up this week. And as you pointed out at the beginning of the show, KD, we do actually have a special guest to help us talk through this as well.
Yes.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello,
Hello,
Squill.
special guest.
Welcome to the show, buddy.
For those of you who don't know Squill, Squill is a member of the staff and is the events coordinator. And Squill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself real quick?
Well, I've played a few MMOs before. I used to play World of Warcraft a year or two ago.
I think I've heard of that.
You think? It's a pretty small game.
A couple people played it, yeah. Is that something you made with you and your friends? No.
Yeah.
World of Warcraft. That's probably the best known, would you think, Dante?
I'd probably say it is the best known MMO.
Played worldwide. A lot of influence from. I was reading about China with how they were looking at freeing up them for gaming on the PS3 and Xbox and stuff like that, relaxing the rules for the last 14 years, the laws. And they were talking about, in the meantime, they will continue to play by the hundreds of thousands, millions, whatever, of Chinese people will continue to play World of Warcraft.
Well, the funny thing is, I mean, that wouldn't even be a topic for the games publishers to pursue if World of Warcraft hadn't been so successful in the West.
Yeah.
It really has brought to attention to the MMO franchises like no other MMO has done for a long time. What did we have before that? You mentioned obviously Ultima, there's EverQuest, which is still going, from Sony Online Entertainment. So it's interesting to see how MMOs are now becoming not only innovative in pushing it into new countries and so on, and leading the way to really open those discussions, but the way that they're starting to become more frequently available on consoles, for example. How long has it been rumoured since Blizzard said, well, we could do World of Warcraft on console, we just choose not to?
Well, it opens the doors, and anytime you have something that's that successful, it's going to make people rethink what they can offer. So, at the very least, even if they don't do it, it's gonna get people looking. Hey, we can create a new kind of game, and the possibilities here are just huge. Because again, nothing would stop people from paying a monthly subscription. It can change the way we pay for certain games. For example, if you put it out free and did add-ons or a monthly fee for playing, and so there's a lot to talk about here. This could change the landscape of some of the games, and the possibilities can open up. We often enjoy those open world environments, and that's what you typically find in a lot of these MMOs. It's the only way they work.
Well, when we sort of talked last week about addressing this topic a bit further, we actually gave Squill a little bit of homework to do for us.
We did.
Which, but bless him, involved downloading a ton of data, and thank you for actually doing that for us.
Let me throw something out there before. It might be part of his homework, but let me just a little blurb I found. With over 10 million subscribers as of October 2012, World of Warcraft is currently the world's most subscribed MMORPG and holds the Guinness World Records for the most popular MMORPG by subscribers. 10 million.
I'd be surprised with that.
It was 14, I think, at one point.
Well, this is Wikipedia, so it's absolutely dead on, and we have to believe it.
To be honest, I think that's a little out. But
everything on the internet is true, Dante.
Know that by now. So yeah, we set Squill some homework. So I kind of want to bring Squill in a bit more here and sort of say. So this week we obviously got you to have a crack at DC Universe and Dust 514. So I know Sony's doing a great job of promoting Dust 514, to be honest with you, but there's still, believe it or not, a lot of people that don't know a great deal about it. So Squill, having the most experience out of us three, because I'll be honest, I keep an hour session here, an hour session there, but I haven't spent a lot of time of it, whereas I know you have this week. So if you want to tell people a little bit more about what Dust 514 is, what the idea of it, and how you found it so far.
Well, I'm not sure about the experience with it compared to you, but yeah, I've been playing it this week, and I get the feel it's a bit like Battlefield, but futuristic.
Yeah.
Do
you see that as a positive, though?
Yes, I do.
So I know when we played it the other night, I said to you then, didn't I? I was like, well, it does seem like it needs a bit more polish with it.
It's still in beta, so I'm sure they'll fix that up later on.
Yeah, and that doesn't concern you at all.
No.
Well, I think that's good then, to be honest with you, for a lot of people that may still be sat on the fence a little bit with Dust 514. I think that eases their mind a little bit, because we've seen it with other betas as well, Battlefield 3 beta and the Ghost Recon beta last year, they're all infamous for being extremely bad betas, but I always wonder with MMO betas if they will change a lot with it. So you reckon the core mechanics for Dust 514 are there, yeah?
Well, there's quite a lot of mechanics in there. I remember trying to change my battle suit. It's really confusing there. That'll probably
Yeah.
take a bit of getting used to.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the killer with it, though, the menu system.
Yeah.
I mean, how long did it take us to set up chat on that? Something like 40
Oh,
minutes?
What?
yeah.
40 minutes?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the
because...
chat was confusing. You had to go into the settings, enable your chat, and then you had to go out of the settings, go to your squad, activate your chat, and that was you. But it didn't tell you how to do it. We had to look it up on the internet.
uh,
It's like a 10-step process just to do
so
it. And
are all the controls and the possibilities of the things you can do, are they all pretty open? Like you can... can you only be a soldier? Is this only like shooting? Or is there a lot more to it?
Well, there's your medic class, like in Battlefield. You can revive people. You can. It's pretty much similar to Battlefield. There's your tanks and aircrafts.
Okay.
You can be soldier, medic, sniper, or like a anti-tank or anti-aircraft, like Marine.
And ranks?
Don't actually know
Rank
about
up?
that yet.
did,
Um,
did, there isn't ranks as such. The way it works is that you kind of have like skills, and you end up acquiring skill points as well as money per battle. So the skill points, then you can then choose to increase your class depending on which one you choose. But as Squill mentioned, some of the the different types of character sets that you have, that there is a with if you can imagine the battlefield landscape as it is, you tend to have all your vehicles there in there ready for you to play. With Dust 514, it's slightly different because you can call them in at any point, depending on how you've set up your character and how you've planned out your resources. So, for example, you can be in the middle of a firefight and then call down a tank at your whim. That tank will then drop out of the sky. You can then hop in it and go and destroy the base. And one of the interesting things, as you mentioned before, KD, with its integration into EVE Online, there is connected play there. So, for example, what you'll essentially be able to do with Dust 514 is you won't just have like battle certain game modes. What you'll be able to do is you'll be able to take on contracts that are offered up by EVE Online players. So EVE Online players will put contracts out that you can choose to accept or decline, and then they can also provide you with resources. One of the probably most famous resources that CCP Games has shown off so far is calling in an orbital strike, where a satellite in EVE will fire a laser-guided pulse beam or something along those lines right down into the enemy on the battlefield in real time. So while somebody does that on a PC, you're experiencing it in the battlefield in Dust 514. And that's what makes the kind of concept of Dust 514 really interesting. Now, as I say, when I played this with Squill the other night, we did actually go through a lot of the menu systems, and unfortunately we weren't able to test it out to its full capability, because every time you play a battle, you get what they call ISK points, or ISK, which is like
your
the
currency.
currency, yeah. Now, in order for us to be able to test out the EVE contract system, we needed to set up a corporation of our own. Think of it as like our own mercenary company.
Guilds.
Yeah, it's the same as guilds on World of Warcraft, but the problem is it costs so much money to actually set one of these things up, and you can, over time, you can pay more money and have more members. I think one of the ones that I saw is that if you pay something like 8 million ISK, that you would get anywhere up to 200 players in your corporation, that you could then take on a contract as a corporation and then hand it down to your guild members. So in some respects, it's not your traditional kind of first-person shooter. Well, this is the impression I got. It's not your traditional first-person shooter in the fact that while it plays like a Battlefield and it feels like a Battlefield, there's all this other dynamics going on with being able to change the landscape by calling stuff in, and then you've got all the contract system and the integration with Eve. And I think, in some respects, that's what sets it apart a bit.
Okay.
It'll be interesting to see how CCP games really push that forward a bit more, because my only concern with it, personally speaking, is it does need time to polish, and I know it's still in beta, but the thing is they're aiming, I think, for September to really be the full time that they push it out. And they also need to implement some other stuff, like you can get these things called Oricon bars, which are like premium buffs that you can pay for. The problem is they cost real money, and at the moment you're supposed to be able to have the choice of where you can use your ISK currency to buy ore. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But at the moment you don't have that choice. You can only choose to buy it for real money, and it can be quite expensive in that respect. Squill, I mean, you play things like RuneScape, so how do you feel the microtransaction system works? Are you okay with that, or comfortable, or would you sort of hesitate at some of the price with that, the real-time pricing with it?
Well, I wouldn't really care that much. Say, like playing WoW, you have to pay, what was it, £9 a month, as far as I remember.
Yeah.
So with this being free, you have the option not to buy the ore, so you can basically play for free.
Yeah. And do you think that draws people in a lot more? I mean, do you think because it is a shooter and it's sort of billed as an MMO shooter that's being provided for free, I mean, do you think that is going to have an impact, especially with it being based on console and having that kind of Battlefield 3 feel to it, or do you think people are still going to be hesitant about it because it's free?
No, if it was me, I'd be quite happy, because it's free. I'd be slightly put off if there was a monthly subscription.
Yeah. That's interesting, actually, because as I say, I mean, you see people, as you say, like pay that monthly subscription for things like WoW, but when something comes along that's free, you do see there's quite a lot of skepticism with it. But hearing from someone that has played WoW, that you'd be happy to take the plunge for free and that you put time into it, I think, CCP games could take comfort in that. And I think, on that basis, we should say to people, if you get a chance, go and check it out, especially you, KD, because I know you like your shooters. So I do think you should definitely check that out. I mean, KD, you've not really been an MMO player for a good number of years. So, I mean, how do you think Dust 514 sounds to you? Would you be skeptical, or would you be happy to take the plunge?
You know what? I don't know if I like the sound of it. I don't know if maybe I'm just a little old school, but I don't know if a shooter is going to go well with the kind of MMO that I would be looking for. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm kind of spoiled to the whole idea of all the other things you can do. And for example, like if this has some mix with EVE Online, but you can't do that end of the MMO without getting on a PC, that's kind of disheartening. And then if you're just basically like Battlefield types of soldiers and you can't do a lot of other things in this big open world, for example, to earn the currency, then it almost turns me off, because I look back, like my biggest example, which is Ultima Online, and you could be a mage, you could be the armored knight foot soldier, you could do the smithing and make weapons, you could mine and get ore and stuff yourself to make weapons and increase your skill by doing it, and selling those increase your gold. Own property, buy buy horses and stuff to improve your speed.
Yeah.
I mean, just like there's a lot of things, and then with combat and everything, there was things where you improved for your clan members, where you could cast a spell and protect other people and heal them, and so you weren't set to being a medic or soldier, something like that on the battlefield. You could also be support in a number of different ways, including making money. So I
Well, we
don't know.
should
I
point.
mean, it just depends on how limited that is. I don't know. I wouldn't say I know enough about that, but just by the sound of it, it sounds a little too geared towards combat and.
Well, we should point out that each speciality does have added benefits. For example, if you choose to be a medic, for example, you will get a bunch of I can't remember if it's skill points or ISK that's allocated to you. So if you choose to sort of run around the battlefield and healing people, there is some kind of incentive there for you if you do that. Let me pose this question to you both then, because I think this would be an interesting one, because I know, as I say, KD, in some respect you're old school, but at the same time you play Call of Duty. If you look at Call of Duty's online multiplayer component, in some respects that can still be classed as an MMO because of all the features, guns, specific things you can all customize. So I put this question to you with that in mind. Do you think first-person shooters should be made into an MMO, or do you think that's one genre that maybe should be left out of the whole MMO thing?
Well, I'm going to say that I think it would take extra effort to make it work. One of the things that strikes me about an MMO, just like you said, I mean, you can classify a lot of games. Like if all of a sudden Call of Duty came out with a room where you had 64 players in it, and then say, well, okay, now we're MMO. That for me doesn't describe a true MMO. I think it needs some symbiotic relationships between all the different things that you can do, so that you can take on different things depending on your mood. One of the things I really liked about Ultima Online is I could get on there and I could do all those things. I could build. I could be a carpenter. I could go kill animals and skin them and make fur into outfits or whatever. Whatever I wanted to do. It was very open to that, and that was like this big open world symbiotic, towns and stuff where people interacted and sold their goods. A person could get good at making bows, for an archer, and go and chop trees, make the logs, turn the wood into boards, and then the boards into a crossbow or whatever that they could sell in town. And the more they did that, the higher their skill until they could make some of the best bows you could buy. And then there became a little mini economy inside the town where you could not only buy from NPC characters, but you could buy and sell from each other. And so that's why I say that like an MMO is almost larger and more intricate as a society than just being a certain number of players. Because if you take any game, not even just first-person shooters, but you just take any game and now all of a sudden you can play with a whole shitload of people, that doesn't make it, like, in my terms, it doesn't make it an MMO. It doesn't make it exciting. In fact, in a lot of game types, I think you would run into, it just becomes ridiculous. You take your average fighting game and then put 60 people in a room or something, and you're just like, oh, this is just chaos. It's not fun. So I don't know. I don't know that a first-person shooter would just take a lot more extra work in my mind.
But given the work that CCP Games have done with EVE, do you not think that if it does need a lot of work put in, that they're kind of the right people to do that? Or
I don't know. That's another thing. I don't know. The other thing is a console with how that works and updating it. I'm almost like, that's kind of.
Well, let me address that actually quickly, because you should point this out with Dust 514. It shows how much faith Sony have in this, because as part of the PlayStation Store redevelopment and redesign, Sony actually went and changed the back-end system. so that basically now whenever CCP games want to put in-game DLC or new items up, they can do it on the fly. They don't have to wait for weekly store updates or anything like that. It can just literally be done and pushed straight into the game in a click of a button at the back-end system. So the fact that they've helped Sony in some respects look at the redesign and the way things work. I know some people aren't particularly a fan of this new store design, but you know, there is a lot of things that have gone on behind to allow for CCP to make the whole process a lot easier. It'll be interesting to see how it goes. Squill, I mean, what do you think? Do you think first-person shooters should kind of be left out of the MMOs, or are you all for it?
I'm not really sure. I've been mostly used to MMORPGs, like WoW, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, they seem to fit better with. I mean, do you get the feeling that the RPGs fit better than the first-person shooters when you play it? Do you feel it's as versatile when it's a first-person shooter as an RPG as opposed to an RPG?
Yeah, an RPG is more customization, whereas shooters, you basically go in, shoot, and that's it.
See, that's an element that, you know, how do you overcome that? You really almost need to make the first-person shooter end of it just the form of combat, and then just develop a whole other bunch of systems around it to make it work. I really see that from just listening to Squill's description of Dust 514. It sounds like there's a lot more needed before it would gain an old school MMORPG guy like me. So that's my honest opinion. I
think from my perspective, Dust 514 does show a lot of potential. I think where, for me personally, it fails a little bit is some of the excellent framework that was put in place with MAG. Now, MAG isn't classed as an MMO, but supported 256 players and had a dynamic command structure in place to ensure that one battle was never ever the same. And I think Dust 514, while it has all the interesting things like menus and so on like that, and you know, customizing your classes and you know, doing that, it's still kind of missing that key feature to keep people going back and having dynamic games constantly. I think, you know, CCP may have just missed out on that. I don't know. I think
so. It's like MAG then.
No, it's not, and I think that's my problem with it. It's not quite as big as it should be. I mean, I even said this to Squill while we were playing the other night, didn't I? That, you know, sometimes the battlefields, even with the range of options you have to do, the battlefields are big, but it feels empty.
Yeah.
Well, is that as a result of not enough players yet? Not enough.
No, these are full lobbies, but because the players are like 32, I'm not sure if that's going to be expanded or not. It just seems pointless to have these massive open maps and not be able to fill them. Now, I'm sure, you know, we are talking about something that is in beta. Once the full version launches in round about September time, you know, it, like any MMO, any new MMO, it takes 6 months to a year to really iron out the bugs and start to implement new changes. So, you know, with Dust 514, it's worth probably taking the plunge for the time being because it is a free-to-play MMO in that respect. But you won't really... I don't think you'll see the benefits of the game until it's been out for at least a year. If that makes sense. You won't really see the potential of it.
Why do you think they're... Why do you... It seems like the logical first choice would be to do something along the lines more World of Warcraft Ultima Online instead of going sci-fi shooter.
I don't know. I mean, from a Dust 514 perspective, I kind of understand the focus on first-person shooter because, you know, they are trying to build it into EVE Online. And given the nature of what EVE Online actually is, you know, you've got to kind of figure out a genre that would work alongside it and not cancel the other, you know, not cancel out what EVE Online's all about, because essentially EVE Online is a real-time strategy stroke RPG game. So, you know, it would seem pointless from CCP's perspective if they made a real-time strategy RPG game for consoles that fitted in with a real-time strategy RPG game on PCs. I don't know. Maybe they have taken the wrong approach. Maybe what they actually could have done is look to bring EVE Online onto consoles, but I don't know how difficult that would be given the dynamics of the actual EVE ecosystem, because while that's moderated, you'll be surprised, I said to Squill about this, in EVE recently, EVE Online, the game developers always challenged players to break it. So one guy collected a fleet of 10,000 spaceships and sent it to the central capital in a bid, launch a coup and, take down the economy of the game. And if he'd succeeded, the developers would have let that flow naturally. They wouldn't have, shut it down and, had to reprogram it or anything, because that's the way it was. And, I wonder if we'll see something like EVE on console. Probably, if MMOs are going to keep growing in terms of variety and numbers, that may be something we may see in the next generation of consoles, somebody planning a project like that. But I couldn't see EVE Online being ported to consoles at the moment, which is why I think, CCP Games went with Dust 514 as a first-person shooter MMO, because it just fits in nicely with the rest of the universe, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, we also run into, as much as we don't like to say it, PCs are still more, or can be, depending on what a person puts into it, but can be a lot more advanced in terms of what it can hold in terms of storage and load times and things like that. And that creates a strong difference between a PC player and a person that owns a standard PlayStation 3. They can't crack it open and improve their console.
Yeah, they can't add a graphics card to update it.
What's that?
No, but
like adding a new graphics card to get better graphics.
Yeah. These kind of things, can affect gameplay, and so you'd be at a strong disadvantage if you took something that's working very well on PC, which people get really into those games and they just tweak the hell out of their computer. They're using keyboards and stuff and a mouse and things like that where they can operate a lot of functions very quickly. Hotkeys is a big one.
Yeah.
You think about, you have a couple buttons on a controller and you can put hotkeys to something to create, what do they call that, where it'll do a whole bunch of functions with the press of one button, whereas you could take a keyboard and do that for a whole bunch of things. So it can dramatically change the way gameplay is on a console compared to a PC without you having to tweak a bunch of stuff severely.
Just want to point out quickly, that Dust 514 does actually support keyboard and mouse play as well as PlayStation.
I don't want you to think that I know that you can't use a keyboard with a PS3. I'm just saying that there's still a striking difference between that. If you were to take a game that's very successful online with PC and move it to a console, even if it ported over very well, you would still have a strong difference in the two right there, just from the makeup of a console versus a PC. And really, these are all the things that led me to get out of PC gaming, because it's always about that latest, greatest technology, because there is advantage there. And, even just with the macros, that's what I was trying to think of. Macros with the keyboard. People develop programs to do stuff for them. What would take you a bunch of button strokes and some concentration, they can set up and have it programmed on their one button on their keyboard. And online turns into who has the best equipment, who's the smartest with hacking, and just like you said with the EVE Online, somebody getting together and saying, well, let's get 10,000 ships and attack the capital. Those kind of environments are a little bit dangerous ground for a console to go into. I really think that, because one of the things I really like about console is how it is simple on that level. I want to put a disc in and I want to be able to play. I don't want to have to be able to tweak settings for 40 minutes to be able to chat with someone.
Okay, well,
it's a ridiculous turn off.
with that in mind, because obviously, as you say, you're more focused to sort of RPG MMOs in that respect.
Yes, definitely.
So we should probably talk about DC Universe.
Let's do it. Squill, tell us what you found out, man.
Yeah.
Oh, I played this I think it was a year ago with Clark. You can create like Superman. There's flying, super speed. I forgot the other class. Do you know, Dante?
I think it's something like strength. The strength, flying, and speed. I think that's right. Yep.
And then you can choose being good or evil. Like you can have mentors being Superman, Batman, and then evil being like Joker and that.
Yeah. So essentially, you create your own superhero, and you have pretty much all of DC's back catalogue at your disposal in terms of people that will offer you missions and quests, and you have mentors as well that will do certain things like grant you extra perks and so on like that. So KD, you were mentioning about the hotkeys, and DC Universe has the hotkey system where you can map your keys to the controller. Which works quite nicely. I mean, how did you feel that you got on with the controls on that, Squill?
Yeah, it was alright. It's been a year actually since I played it. I patched it there, but I haven't actually played it.
Yeah.
I think wasn't it R2 and then directionals?
Yeah. Yeah, because that was one of the things that got me with it in terms of because I did actually buy this on launch day, and I did actually pay the subscription. Although we should point out that it's now free to play, which seems to be a lot of direction that the MMOs on console seem to be taking at the moment. But one of the things that I was impressed with was just the ease at the character creation, and then the key system. The ability to essentially do the same thing as hotkeys allows you to do, but do it on the fly with a dual shock pad. I mean, they really did put a lot of thought and of effort into that, and made it such an easy process. You could be playing it for 10 minutes, and by then you pretty much know how to start working your way to mastering the game. Have you had a chance to have a bash at it at all, KD, yourself?
No,
is
actually, I haven't.
Something that you've seen around and thought, I wouldn't mind giving that a shot, or is it just because the thing with it is it's branded material, and I think that's inclined to put some people off a little bit because it's DC Universe as opposed.
I'd much prefer Marvel, personally.
But what I mean, but what I mean is like the PC players have a similar equivalent, although my personal opinion, it's not done as well.
Let me ask you this:
City of Heroes, and it's kind of like that in some respects. So
let me ask you this: so if I had a keyboard and I was playing that game, could I macro a bunch of different controls to my keyboard?
Yes.
So I would therefore have an advantage if I had a keyboard.
Yeah.
And
yes, I don't know.
I could pound a bunch of keys and create a bunch of whatever it is, different superpower actions. I don't know enough about the game, but
I think if you wanted to go in depth with that, you really could, and that wouldn't be a problem. I think what DC Universe does really well is it makes those that wouldn't normally play MMOs. Because, I mean, all of us on the show today have all had experience with MMOs. I can't say that 70 million PS3 owners have had experience with MMOs. And so for DC Universe to sort of come in with not only a brand image, but pull it off reasonably well with a simple control scheme that should you want to go in depth with it, you can.
Now, how do they handle dying and things like that? How does Dust 514 handle dying? How does the DC Universe handle it?
Well, with Dust, you're actually clones. So every time you die, you have another clone.
You just
but
break
you have
another
to
clone out of the
restock,
closet.
but but you have to restock all your equipment, which costs money. So
Okay.
every time you die, you lose that equipment, but you just restock it all.
Okay. And DC, are you able to die, or is it just like you lose your...
I think you just die and then respawn, as far as I remembered.
Okay.
Yeah, you have like certain respawn points within the city and stuff. But you also get, if you're playing in a group of people or there's, other heroes passing by while you're in the middle of a fight, they can heal you even if they're not engaged in the fight. I think that's something we should point out with DC Universe is that one thing it does brilliantly is that while you're having a fight, unless it's in one of the themed sort of underground levels and stuff, if you're in the instances, you can pretty much come across tons of people just flying past of all different varieties and colours while you're sat there having a fight, and they can choose to join in or choose to ignore it. And that's an interesting thing because it means the cities of Metropolis and Gotham, for example, are always a dynamic changing city, because as you travel through, whether it be on the way to a quest somewhere else in the city, you never quite know what you're going to expect. And to be honest with you, there's very few RPGs where that MMO RPGs that pull that off. I can't really think of any off the top of my head. I mean, in some respects, WoW does that a little bit. But even then, it doesn't do it on the scale of, say, DC Universe. And it's interesting as well, Katie, because you mentioned about the whole, what if you had a fighting game with 60-odd players? Well, essentially, DC Universe is...
That's what it is.
Combat is brawling. It is fighting, hand-to-hand combat, stroke superpower combat. So, they have done a great job in pulling that off. Now, again, I put this question to you, which is, it's free to play, but it hasn't, in some respects, it does things that a lot of MMOs do. So, what I would say is, if that sounds...
6 players, isn't it?
Sorry?
For free, you can only create 6 players, as far as I remember.
Yeah, so essentially you could create 3 on the heroes and 3 on the villains, and I think that's more than enough for people given... What is the level cap on that?
I'm not sure.
I think it's around about 60 or 70, and that's quite a high level cap, because when you start getting the higher numbers, it starts getting really difficult to earn points.
Just remembered what the other class was. It's gadgets, like Batman and that.
Oh, yes. Yeah, now I remember. But the thing with it is, what I'm intrigued by is that if it does things that are so much better than certain other MMOs that are out there, especially on PC and stuff, and they've put it on PS3, they've made it accessible for people in terms of it being easier to control, they've also made the depth there. Do you think that console players are still not warming to MMOs? Because it's interesting, really. If you look at the subscription figures for DC Universe, it's nowhere near, even just the sign-ups, it's nowhere near the numbers that WoW commands for a subscription-based service. So, do you think Sony are right to keep pushing the free MMOs? Because obviously there's, in some respect, there's an audience for it, but then why aren't the audience coming to it?
Well, it's for those reasons, I think. I think it's something that's on a much larger scale than one would first realize. I really see a lot of challenges with a console to be as open and as diversified as the PC game. Even just moderators and having things like that, having games where you require somebody to almost watch more for various forms of cheating, because people figure stuff out quickly, and you'd almost need a lot more people kind of watching what's going on. Whereas like a Call of Duty or something, you can just set the game dynamics up where, things are happening so quickly, and then the game's over and another one's starting, and there's not time in there to figure out some glitch in the corner in a real live multiplayer game like there is when it's constantly on. The rooms never closes for another one to start up, and you need a lot more. You need a lot more resources like that. You need a lot more things to watch and to balance. Maintaining a balance. That's the other thing. You look at like a Call of Duty shooter, and a person doesn't level up to the extent where they're just dominating on the field. Whereas if you have a year on in an MMO, and then some noob comes along and you're level 80, and you just break out your super cannon and put it on your shoulder and kill hundreds, or you call in your EVE online strike from space and wipe out a whole bunch of people that have spent time, creating their characters, and they die, and there's just a lot of dynamics there that you have to do to make it fun, to make it challenging, to give people a variety of things to do besides just killing.
What you mentioned there is applicable in, say, Dust 514's case, but can you say that you could apply the same thing to DC Universe, really? Because it isn't, as you prefer, an MMORPG. You don't have to worry about those stuff, and you certainly wouldn't have to worry about cheaters if you're playing the console version of DC Universe, because short of hacking your PS3 and jailbreaking the thing and then trying to actually get the game, the DC Universe MMO is dedicated servers run by the guys behind it. So unless you hack into their servers for console, there's no chance of you cheating on it.
Well, it sounds to me like they probably filter everything out to be a lot more balanced, and there's not as much to do, open world like. I'm assuming you don't have, like there's not a character where you can just go mine gold, for example, mine ore in DC Universe. So
I'll be honest with you, I'm going to abstain answering that question, because the last time I played it, they had these things called auction houses within the game itself. Now, at the time, you could only auction equipment. I believe with DLC being brought in and numerous other patches since DC Universe launched, there is actually now weapon creation system.
There you go.
That's
more towards an MMO in my mind, right there.
Weapon creation system put in a resource management thing, and to the point of where if you buy one of the DLC packs, you can actually create your own layer and base of operations where and design it completely how you see fit.
There you go. See, that's attractive. That's attractive add-ons. That's more MMO and less fighting game to me. Less fighting game with lots of people. Because, the other thing is the balance. If you're able to make a Superman character and you can just annihilate everything, you can't really have that with somebody that wants to work with gadgets and stuff, and be a Batman if they're going to get annihilated. You have to have advantages and disadvantages and some way to rank that up.
Squill will probably agree with me on this since we last played it. A lot of people had concerns about that, because everybody was like, well, if I can create a superhero, I'm just going to create Superman and pwn everybody. But the way they balance out the character customization from the start, they make it so nobody is invulnerable, and that in some respects you're only taking parts of other superheroes' powers. It's not like you can have all Superman's powers, but at the same time they still keep superheroes like Superman relevant, because they become your mentor. Do you see what I mean? They grant you extra perks, but there was no way that you could become a Superman character to the point of where you could just annihilate everybody, because of the way they balance it's very clever how they've done the character customization to that point, and the way they used these indestructible characters as mentors rather than as I can take all Superman's powers and have them all for myself, more ha ha ha. You know what I mean?
And also, there's two servers. There's a PvP server and then a PvE server. So if you're in the PvP and you're just out fighting, a villain comes along, he could kill you. So if you're in the PvE, you're fine. You can just fight alongside.
It's funny that you say that, because Ultima Online got to having two servers. They called them two LANs. They were basically identical, and you could go into which one, depending on what kind of fighting style you wanted to, if you wanted to take on PvP, because that's one thing that really, really ticks off
Yeah.
MMO players, is when somebody kills you and takes all your stuff, because it could be, your trusted friend, suddenly turns on you. Hey, you got a really nice sword. You're hurt really bad from the battle. Let me heal you. Wait, no, I'm going to kill you and take your stuff. So yeah, I mean, that's one of those things that was became a separation in a lot of online MMORPGs because of that. But it's funny that that's being worked into the console as well. So is there a lot of NPC characters and things like that? Is there an interaction with an economy in it, or is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It
You
has
have
its
to get
own economy system and stuff.
See, when you first described it, I would have said, that doesn't seem like an MMO to me, but it sounds like the things they're adding with being able to build a lair and do other things, that's to me, like I said, that's the things that stand out as being an MMO more than taking a shooter and putting a whole bunch of people in it. It's like MAG. From everything I know about MAG does not seem like an MMO to me at all. I don't care how many players you put into it.
By definition, it is, if I'm honest.
Well, by numbers, I mean, how do you determine a number? And then it used to be you could play one or two people on a console, and now it's getting, larger and larger rooms and stuff like that.
Actually,
How do you keep moving that bar to define an MMO? How do you define it by a number?
I disagree with you on that, and this is part of the reason why I wanted to look at MMOs specifically, and we'll get on to the future of them in a minute. But because a lot of standard console games seem to be going backwards in reducing multiplayer numbers, and that annoys the hell out of me when you take into account that if a console can run things like MAG, why can someone like EA, for example, not have that sort of amount of players in a Battlefield? Because it's doable, it really is. The infrastructure's there. Is it because they're lazy?
But does that make it an MMO?
They don't think they want
seriously, that makes it an MMO in your mind, though.
Player count, I think, yeah, it does.
So you're just going by that strict old definition of how many people are in there that somebody came up with a long time ago, when just a couple people in a room was standard. I mean, think about when you played, go back to PS2 when you were playing online and you were playing SOCOM and stuff like that, and then bring that up to modern day, and then you go back to Call of Duty 4. If you were to suddenly come out with another version of that is exactly the same, and now 100 people can be in a lobby, and that's an MMO.
Okay, well, maybe I should clarify more where my position is with it. My understanding, my definition of an MMO is anything higher than a player count of 32, regardless of genre.
Okay. Well, I wasn't relating it to genre as much as I was relating it to all those other things that make it a dynamic society type world. Because let's face it,
I don't think you can do that with 32 players.
There's not a genre descriptive of that, is there?
Yeah.
There's not anything. Can you think of a genre that describes a large, intricate society that's online, always running, even when you're not there? Is there a genre description that you can think of for that?
Welcome.
Pretty much MMO.
Yeah, MMO, which is defined by just number of people. So.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I as I say, I look at it from a modern definition in some respect that 32 player count for me is anything higher is an MMO in my books. I just think because we've a lot of games over the years have sort of maxed out at 32, and you look at, as I say, you look at some of them and you think, well, that could be way more than it is.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I mean, there's a lot of games that would probably be a lot more fun with a lot more players. But I mean, there's no telling why they stick to a standard, set couple or something in most games when they clearly it seems like the technology's there to very easily do it. I know one thing that has always got me is cooperation. when you have a big MMO, you can drive a lot of people working together and having a tremendous amount of cooperation and get a lot of things done. And then you can have the simplest of games where you just have one or two people that you need, or even 8 or something like that. Hello, Burnout Paradise.
Yeah.
Where you just cannot coordinate anything, and it makes the game aggravating if there's a cooperation element and you get no cooperation as a regular. You know what I'm saying? You log in and it's some random person, and it's like, hey, let's do this. I'm trying to get an achievement or a trophy. And they go, I don't care about that. Or screw you, I'm going to mess with your game. You're about to earn your trophy or something, and then they just interrupt it. Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think there's like I said, there's a lot of intricate things there, and if they were to work out where a game can be fun and society based and have lots of people and have it open world and all that, that's a tremendous task, but it's also very rewarding.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So, okay, well, we've kind of addressed the MMO shooter, but still,
yes.
I think we're all still kind of a bit uncertain as to whether an MMO shooter works. We kind of talked about MMORPGs with DC Universe and stuff. So, let's switch it up a bit. Let's talk about a mash of the two. And this ties in nicely. If you remember a few weeks ago, KD, we had that discussion about where technology of games is going,
Mm-hmm.
the TV show and integration stuff. So recently, obviously, Trion Worlds announced in partnership with Sony Entertainment Online they were making this game, which will be available on all platforms, PC, Xbox, and PS3. We should probably just mention that. This is a third-person shooting MMO with RPG elements. So essentially what that means is that you will have, so for example, as Squill mentioned earlier, if you go into an instance, for example, that will be a battlefield where you can be potentially fighting with hundreds to, if not thousands of players at any one time on a battlefield in what they call Shadow Wars. Then you have all the stuff that goes on outside of that. So you have your main game worlds where you'll go and get your quests, and there'll be, I guess, some RPG stuff involved with that and some shooty bits involved with that. But that seems to be the right blend of it. What makes Defiance more interesting is that also that external element as well. So, for example, if you're watching the TV show and a character as part of the storyline is removed from the show for a couple of weeks, while you're playing Defiance MMO, you may come across that character in the game who will then have a storyline, who you may have to do quests for and stuff, and then that will kind of explain why they're not in the show at the moment. And then when they come back into the show, people who are playing the MMO will have some idea of where that person's been in the time that they're missing. So
Interesting.
what do you think of the concept of that? I mean, does that sound like, that really is evolving the MMO side of things a little bit more than perhaps, some of the MMOs that are about? Because if you look at, the two MMOs that we've talked about in some respect, they're kind of still on that traditional model, where you purchase, create creative content and so on, and that has an impact in what you do in the game. But in this case, you would still have the traditional aspect of it, but there's also that added element that what you do in the game affects the show and vice versa.
Does it affect the show directly, or is it like a side element in the show?
No, it affects the show directly. The writers have promised to ensure that that's the case.
Well, I mean, that there's a couple things there. First, I find that very interesting. I think it's a cool concept. But then you wonder if it'll work as well, because, there's always those people that'll try to throw a monkey in a wrench. They'll test it.
Yeah.
let's get a large group of people together and see if we were to kill this person off, what that would do. Would the show really, take their title character out or something? And I mean, I guess it's all ultimately how it all works at the end. If it works out and it makes for a cool dynamic story, or if the writers already have something in their head and they're kind of leading people, you know what I mean? And if that bleeds through,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, let's put this guy out here and we know they're going to kill him at some point because we'll make it so they hate him from the show.
Yeah.
And they're counting on that, and they make it happen somehow. I'm reminded of something very, very close to this that happened with Ultima Online. And if you're not a historian of old MMORPGs, you may not know this, but there was one of the main developers of Ultima Online had a character in Ultima Online where he used to address the masses. And his character was Lord British. And I can give you a second to look that up if you need to, but at some point there was a group of characters that figured out a way to kill him.
Yeah.
And he was supposed to be unkillable. As a figurehead and being able to speak to the masses and stuff in the game, he was a character in the game that they had set up to not be killed, but some group of players found a way around that. And so when, surprise, out of the blue, they launch an attack on Lord British to kill him, what do you suppose the people that created the game and everything did? They said, no, that's not going to happen. So, I mean, it's one of those things, it's like everything's great and it sounds great on the surface of directing a story until it doesn't go the way they planned.
Yeah.
Picture if you had the entire story interwoven around all the people and what they did, and then all of a sudden all these people get upset about something in the story and just completely devastate main characters and everything like that. It's I could just see it being a total mess if they don't do it right and they don't at least lead it a little bit, which makes it not as open and flexible as it would appear, if that makes sense.
So I guess what you're saying is essentially they've got to get it right off the bat and have a backup plan just in case.
And a backup plan for the backup plan. And
Yeah.
really, it's Hollywood. They're all about entertainment. They're trying to draw people in. And we can't be naive enough to think that they're going to let us write the story because, how do you get, tens of thousands of people to write a story if they're playing a game? They're not. They're going to be concerned about their own little element. And little old me, if I say, well, I want to change this, it's not going to, I can't believe it's going to make some big effect. But at the same time, the mood of the people and everything like that is going to be kind of dictated by the story and the mood, the show. It could become a case of the show flops hard and the game is really cool, or vice versa, because you're tying two elements together and they both have to work now in this case.
I should point out
One's
that,
counting on the other.
assuming that I'm assuming that the budget for the shows isn't a great, huge amount of money because it's being aired on Sci-Fi.
Well, I don't know why you would say that. Sci-fi is very expensive in terms of shows.
Yeah,
Sci-fi is very expensive.
Yeah, but I
genre.
guess what I mean is if you take into account, say, for example, like, the budget for Walking Dead or a TV show, or the budget for, like, Heroes when it was on TV, you're talking about $1 million, $1.5 million to an episode, whereas for something like this, yes, it's going to be expensive, but in comparison, it's not the case. Where it's as costly, and then also take into the fact that Sci-Fi understand that they're not a premium, they're not the top TV, most watched TV channel in the world, so they do have some understanding of their demographic. I don't know, Squill, I mean, do you think that the concept of Defiance is something as an MMO player that appeals to you? Do you think it's kind of pushing it on and evolving a little bit more, or?
Yeah, I'm sort of more interested in how the TV is going to link in, and also because I've read that there's some of the writers are from Battlestar Galactica, which I like.
Ooh. Now, see,
There's definitely
things like
quality.
that are exciting to hear because I'm going to tell you right now, I think that there's a core group of sci-fi fans, and I really do believe that those are make up the majority of the people that are very dedicated to certain shows, the Star Treks, the Star Wars, the Battlestar Galacticas. These are the people that do the cosplay. These are the ones that are the creative folks that play the Dungeons and Dragons. And if you can grab them with a show and a game, I think it could be very awesome. But at the same time, if they do something and alienate that group, look out.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Battlestar Galactica. What a cool show that was too.
I think that goes to show that that in some respects this is going to be a rather interesting experiment. I think what makes me a little bit more excited for it is the expansion of the experiment. I kind of understand it on PC. If that was the concept. Especially if you could be playing the MMO while watching the TV, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of get that experiment, but the fact that they're bringing it to consoles and they're bringing it across all consoles, it'll be interesting to see whether or not that really does take off. And I think that's a non-subscription based game again. That's another free-to-play MMO.
Yeah. Now, do you think that has something to do with Sony's entertainment focus, as opposed to that?
No, I think that's more an industry-based wide thing. I think people realise that it doesn't matter how great the MMO could be. It could be the best MMO in the world, but given the install base that Warcraft has, as it stands at the moment, a lot of MMO producers feel that that they haven't got a chance. You're essentially asking them to topple some. They're essentially asking companies to effectively pinch World of Warcraft's install base, and as we've seen with just normal console games, how hard is it to get a first-person to shooter, no matter how good it or rubbish it is, to sell anywhere near the quantity that Call of Duty does, for example? It's extremely difficult, and so from the MMO industry's perspective, they have to have that hook, that incentive to get people in, because even they can't necessarily just rely on the content, because World of Warcraft is in that unique position where any MMO that ever comes out is always going to be held in comparison to it, the same way that even though we know some of the Call of Duties, especially of late, have been absolutely rubbish, every first-person shooter game is always held in comparison to Call of Duty.
Well, there's I don't know. I mean, the console gamer is also more likely to jump from game to game, don't you think? As opposed to getting involved in ask a World of Warcraft player what else they play.
Nothing.
I don't know. I did. I was
well, you were probably a small majority. MMOs are the whole point of it is to keep somebody long term.
Okay, but then
there's no trophies that you earn and you leave and you go to the next game, or you wait for the DLC download.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because I do want to address that a little bit later on, which is how do you think the trophy is going to impact? Because we'll come to that shortly, because there is another MMO that I do want to sort of talk about before we sort of look at some of the other aspects, which is the very well publicised Final Fantasy XIV.
A Realm Reborn.
Yes, we had a conversation about this before, didn't we, Squill? Which is, if Square Enix has alienated a lot of its fans, certainly over the, I guess, hardcore fans, I should probably say, over the last couple of years, with the questionable direction it's taken the Final Fantasy series. And when Final Fantasy XIV was first announced, everybody sort of gasped and went, "Yay, it's coming!" And then all of a sudden, the online thing came underneath the logo, and everybody sort of went, "Oh, here we go again." Everybody just sort of like groaned a little bit, and Square Enix did nothing to, in some respect, enhance those sort of ease those fears that people had with the online side of it, because when the game launched last year, it got a lot of bad press, and it had a lot of bad press leading up to it anyway, to do with the way that the subscription works. At the time, the subscription was based on a system where you would use real money to buy crystals, and then the crystals would pay for your monthly subscription.
Sort of a bit like Microsoft then.
Yeah, it was a very long-winded way of process of doing the subscription base, rather than just saying, look, it's £10 a month, take it or leave it. And it was a very strange way. And then it was publicised throughout the course of the initial beta that there was going to be play time caps on it, that you couldn't go over a certain amount of hours in a month.
What?
Because what they didn't want people to do was get addicted to the game. Now, surely, okay.
They didn't want people to get addicted to the game. Yeah, you wouldn't want people addicted and playing your game all the time. Who would want that?
I know, and you know what? In some respects, you can admire them for that a little bit. Because while it sounds like a stupid decision, in some respects, as MMO players, I've done it myself, you are inclined every now and again to go on a bit of an MMO binge where you just literally play the game solid for good 14, 15 hours. I can understand them in that respect, but to do an hour cap over the course of a month, I don't know, it was bizarre. So that not only did they have all that kind of bad press from it, but it just seemed that there was sort of being self-defeating. And then obviously the game launched and there was a ton of bugs. There was a lot of gameplay mechanic issues, and so essentially by the end of 2012 they actually shut the game down.
So all your time that you're allowed to play is spent looking at an error screen, trying to figure out how it works. Buy some crystals.
But Square Enix, not to be deterred, actually shut the game down before the end of 2012. They refunded everybody that paid a subscription. Excuse me. And they made it basically free to play for a short period of time before they shut it down. And they've actually made a big push to redevelop the game completely. They've fixed all the errors, they've put a hell of a lot more gameplay elements in, they've polished a lot of the graphical things within the game, and they've also reevaluated some of the policies they had in place. They even came out and publicly acknowledged that maybe perhaps some of the things they did, like the crystal subscription system and the player hour limit on a monthly basis, was probably not the wisest decision. So that's set to relaunch again this year. It's been redesigned, and it's now got a new subtitle of A Realm Reborn. I think what's interesting for me for Final Fantasy XIV is we talk about graphics in MMOs, and you said about obviously if you play MMOs on a PC, and as it gets an update, you have to buy a new graphics card and so on. What's interesting about Final Fantasy XIV coming to console is it looks fantastic. It absolutely does look mind-blowing if you've seen any of the stuff from it. And that's something that's going to continue, because Square Enix, in some respect, no matter how bad their games are, or have questionable direction, they're always able to get the most out of console graphics hardware. So I can't see there being a problem with, a couple of years down the line, that the graphics will look any rubbish, unless you're sort of putting it in a direct comparison with the next gen consoles should they release. So it's going to be interesting with that one. Squill, have you heard much about the Final Fantasy XIV reboot? Is that something you're looking forward to personally?
Yeah, I watched the trailer the other day. It gave me goosebumps thinking about it. which is a good sign, obviously.
I was going to say that's interesting to hear, really, because as I say, I mean, as a Final Fantasy fan, I've always kind of been like, I'm always excited for their next game, even if the last one was rubbish. And then, the Final Fantasy 14 debacle has sort of kind of put me off, the thing. But I was like, yeah, I saw the trailer and I was like, that looks really, really good. And if they've done the fixes that they promised as well, I mean, looking at it, because while we've looked at the other MMOs, they've all been free to play. But obviously with Final Fantasy 14, it's going to be a subscription-based game. So for me, to be honest with you, looking at it at the moment, if they have made the changes and so on, and the way it looks, I'm happy paying the subscription. Are you?
Yeah.
KD, I don't know if you're particularly familiar with like Final Fantasy games and stuff, but would you? I'm sure you know what a Final Fantasy game is.
Yes. So
if you then put that in an MMO space that looks absolutely just mind-blowingly, fantastically good looking graphically, is that something you would look at, getting on board with?
No, no. I mean, I'm not. That's not something that's. Like I said, I've kind of laid out all the things that are important to me, and having not really played that series and everything, I mean, just from the comments you're telling me about certain companies, just the whole thought process involving MMOs that we've talked about. There's just a lot of things that it's going to take for something like that to work for me. So I don't know.
Well, what do you reckon, Squill? Do you reckon that Final Fantasy 14 could probably change KD's perspective on that?
Yeah. I think
Maybe I'm not open to giving them a try, just based on
that's what I think.
They're so involved that giving them a shot, it seems like a big leap of dedication. I'll try a free game. I'll try.
But see, that's interesting because when I said earlier, I asked you the question. I said, well, it's free to play. Would you give it a shot? And you were kind of meh. And it's now that we're talking about a premium.
Well, it loses some of its value too, doesn't it? I mean, if you give something away, doesn't it, Squill, in your mind? I mean, if you get something to the point where, like, take something from it's paid and all this, and then you go all the way down to free.
Yeah.
It takes away away some of the appearance of value there. It's like, okay, now it's pretty much worthless. We just want some people in here. Get in here.
But it's basically just trying to lure people in there to get.
Yeah,
and I know that, and so it's a turnoff.
But having said that, I mean, if you take into account, okay, like we mentioned before, like with DC Universe, that was originally a subscription-based service. It went free to play. But in that element, the quality of it, I would personally say, has got better.
I don't know.
From what I was originally playing a subscription for, so I kind of understand what you're saying. Basically, if crap's free, it's still crap.
And then I don't know.
But
I could seriously see myself getting into if Ultima Online came out on PS3. That would be it for me, man. That would probably be my game, and I would be stuck on that, and I would probably never play anything else again.
So let me put that question to you a different way then. If Final Fantasy 14 was like Ultima Online, would you take the plunge to play it on the PS3 and pay the subscription?
Yes.
Welcome.
See that?
Squill's logging in the chat room.
But no, I mean that's what all I was trying to get to the bottom of, because essentially what I wanted to point out is that we're sort of looking at this in a critical sense, but we can't ignore MMOs because they're coming fast and furious. Really, I mean, we've talked about some of the ones already.
They're pretty diversified, though. There's nothing really defined. This is still an open ball field on this, and this is something that there's a number of directions you can take an MMO, and they still haven't even emulated the great ones.
See, that's what I kind of want to talk about next, which is, if you look at the influx of MMOs we're getting at the moment, and the fact that now consoles being brought into that cycle, can you expand on where you'd actually want to see them go? Because if they're not doing enough to attract you on console now, and in some respects they're not doing enough of what the old ones do, how does it push forward? How does it evolve? What would essentially get you to be playing the MMOs on the console? Because it obviously can't be a pricing factor in that respect. So there's got to be something more. So how do we see it going forward? How do we see the whole MMO thing moving forward and evolving? Because it's not going to go away anytime soon. Certainly, for console owners, in some respect, we are going to get more of these things. So how does it evolve, and is it a good thing?
Well, yeah, I don't know. Bring back Ultima Online.
I should have known when I asked that question. I should have known. I would be like,
well, would the big question, would World of Warcraft work if you put it on PS3 and you put it on Xbox right now? Would it work?
Oh, you definitely need a keyboard for that, and I would not play that with a controller.
What's that, Squill?
I would not play it with a controller.
Wouldn't play with a controller. So okay, so now we're into extra equipment needed. So it's breakout keyboard and mouse for your PS3.
Yeah, but let's be honest. Most people have a keyboard and mouse lying around the house.
Most people?
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like a poll question. Let's ask how many of our members have a keyboard attached to their PS3.
Well, no, I'm not saying to the PS3, but I guess what I'm saying is most people would have a USB keyboard and a USB mouse somewhere kicking around in a box. I don't even know about that. Which essentially is not exactly difficult to hook up and use.
I had one and I broke it.
I often get criticised for not plugging my keyboard in when and to be honest with you, I probably should do, but I'm so used to using the DualShock for my gaming and the keyboard for the laptop and stuff. It's like I don't ever think about it. And I do have a ton of USB keyboards that I've collected over the years that I could just stick in. That's one of the beauties of PS3 in some respect. It does support a lot of stuff that you probably already own anyway.
Yeah.
So I can't really see, as I say, even if you're going out and buying a new console specifically for an MMO, I can't really see people being, saying I'm not going to do that because I need a keyboard and mouse to play it. Because what's a keyboard and mouse these days? $5 to $10 for a pair.
Well, it's still an extra thing. If somebody can't picture buying it for all the other games that they play on console, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, there's this game, but yeah, I'd have to buy a keyboard and that. Then it's it's like why not play Guitar Hero? You just got to buy a guitar.
But at the end of the day, if you're buying it on the basis of you're buying a new console to play it, I mean, what's $5-10 when you're paying $300? It's not really. I wouldn't imagine. To be honest with you, I couldn't imagine anyone who went out and bought a console and the clerk saying, well, you can have a HDMI cable for $2, and them saying, well, no, you either give it to me or
yeah, but I mean, you're forgetting the bigger picture, which is okay. Now you're talking why not just get the Vita? Why not get a camera? Why not get a special DualShock? Why not get the Move controllers? By the time you're all done, just to play the special games, now we're...
Yeah, but you've got to put it into context, though. That's the thing, because, yes, you're right. If you took it out of context, you could argue, well... You
don't know you're missing a game if you haven't played it.
But, to put it in context, if you had to buy a keyboard and a mouse, the cost is minimal to actually go and do that game. And it's worth also pointing out that unlike, say, a PlayStation Move camera or a PlayStation Move or a Vita... in some respects, a keyboard and mouse would have general use that you would find useful on a daily basis. So just to keep it in context and not expand any further, I genuinely couldn't see if someone was getting excited about an MMO and said, yep, that's the reason I'm going to drop $300 on a PS3 and then, needing a keyboard and mouse to get the best out of that MMO. I couldn't see anybody turning that down and going, well, no, I'm not going to do it for the sake of $5 to $10 for a keyboard and mouse, because you say it's extra equipment. I'd probably argue different and say, well, it's not really extra because you can get more use out of it, more universal use out of it. But I guess my point is that with MMOs, as I say, rapidly increasing, we as console players do have to sort of question, are we going to adapt to it? Do we want to see more MMOs? That I suppose is a bigger question.
I do.
Because
Squill,
there's
you want to
obviously
see
a
more?
market for it.
What do you think, Squill?
Hmm?
Like to see more MMOs?
Yes.
Do you think there's a place for them? Do you think they're
But
in their infancy?
RPGs. I don't think MMO FPS are any good.
Yeah. I mean, is there another genre we're forgetting about too? What would be a good MMO genre
I don't know.
besides RPG,
Or-
obviously?
Do you know what?
RPG.
You could run a racing one. I mean,
Oh,
who
yeah,
is it
yeah.
that did it a while ago? I think it was EA with Need for Speed World. With like the pro racing and stuff, and that's certainly an area that a series like Gran Turismo could probably move in if it wanted to.
Burnout. Have a big open world with all kinds of streets and racing.
Yeah, but they can do that as a standard console game. So what you'd have to consider is what could they do to make what elements, MMO elements, could they put in that would make it worth developing?
What if you had a race for money system and you built up cars and all that other stuff and had a garage and a shop and went and bought car parts and...
Yeah, but would that not be the same
large
as,
MMO?
Would that not be the same as, say, Need for Speed World, where the principle is the same, that you earn money, you compete in virtual professional races, and then you build and buy more cars, build them up, and qualify for different categories of racing? Would that not be the same as, in some respects, you wouldn't necessarily need an open world to be able to do that? And the other dynamic, I guess, for the racing MMO is you'd have to think about how you would actually fill that open world as well.
Yeah.
As opposed to, say, with
NPCs.
professional racing sim, it would be pretty, you wouldn't have to worry about that. But then how do you incorporate, as you say, NPCs and
Non-playing cars.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in some respects, the logical thing would say that actually kind of makes sense, but really, I imagine in practice it probably doesn't work that well.
I know. I think it's in its infancy coming to console. I really do. There's a lot. I would like to see them try and emulate the great ones and see how that would work out. There's nothing wrong with a World of Warcraft knockoff coming to console. If they don't want to do it, someone else should do it. Bring back Ultima Online.
So you're going to say through this show, isn't
we
it?
can
Bring back
kill
Ultima.
Lord British
Bring
again.
But I mean, as I say, I asked the question before. Where the MMO? What's interesting about this is, I asked the question. I say, do we want more MMOs? And I think we all agree that we do want more MMOs on console. It's something certainly we would like to see. But
More of everything, Dante.
But the thing is, we still can't really say what we'd actually want to see. What more is it we want these people making MMOs to do to persuade us to actually put the time in, even though we want more of them?
I'll tell you what I'd like to see. I'd like to see a redefining of MMO to not just be a large number of people.
Yeah, I think you might have to contact the English dictionary.
Or another genre category that number of people. Defining a genre by just a large number of gamers being in a room.
But I thought that's what
Terrible.
MMO stands for.
Yeah. I think you're questioning the integrity of what an MMO, what massive
I am.
multiplayer is, which is strange, but never
A genre just based on a large number of people. I don't know. Where's the game content? How does that tell you anything? And it's so broad. You
Yeah,
know.
but we say MMOs for short because essentially so that people identify that we are talking about massive multiplayer online games. But you know, when we talk about specific titles, they always have the MMO RPG, MMO RTS, MMO FPS. You know, they're never described as just an MMO. And it's the same with Warcraft, World of Warcraft. It's still described as an MMO RPG. You wouldn't, I think, anybody looking at World of Warcraft and went, well, what is World of Warcraft? The only way you could describe it is an MMO RPG. You wouldn't just go, oh, it's just an MMO.
Or just an
So,
RPG.
yeah. So you
Yeah,
would automatically think
it's
that
you're just mashing two categories together.
No, it's essentially...
You're mashing
not
two
so
genres
much,
together.
Well,
That's
it's
how you're
not
doing
mashing them. It's essentially describing it as it is. It is a massively multiplayer online role-playing game. That's not that's not mashing it together. That's just what it is. That's its definition in its purest form. It's not like you could pick any sort of genre and put it with it. But
you want to put the most defining thing about a game first to really define it with one genre. So you can have these games that have music and a puzzle and their action, and like every website can define them under a different genre, but ultimately you got to come down to what is it that's mostly going on. If it's got music throughout, then you would probably say it's a music game. If you've got like platformers, a favorite one of mine, defining that. So I think it's a cop out to just say MMO is just by number of people. I really do, because that doesn't tell you anything. That doesn't tell you shit. Think about all the genres. It's action, it's puzzle,
it tells you
it's RPG, and then you got another one that's like, well, it's got a lot of players, and it's online.
Can't get around. Yeah, but if
well, most games are online.
If you describe anything as an MMO,
has it got 1,000 players or has it got 32? It just hits the button.
Well, it doesn't matter because it's still a massively multiplayer online game.
I don't know. I'd like to see it more defined as like a massive online society or something, an MOS or I don't know.
Utopia, yeah, we get it.
Let's say Final Fantasy 13.
I call for a definition redo.
Sorry, what were you saying, Squill?
But like, say Final Fantasy 13 is an RPG, but you can't say it's an MMO RPG because there is no online. So with WoW being all online, it has to be MMO RPG because there's no offline.
And that's an interesting point because, okay, let's put it another way. If Final Fantasy 13...
So what if it has a single player, then it's not an MMO?
Hold on. Let me just finish the point. If Final Fantasy 13, for example, had online leaderboards and some sort of connectivity, it would still be classed as an RPG. And the reason for that is that it's not got massively multiplayer online system implemented into it. It may have things like leaderboards and stuff and some form of online connectivity, like you could trade items and stuff over PSN messages or whatever, but it still wouldn't require you to all be in one space, or essentially changing how the world dynamic flows with it and partake.
Well, it's not defined by one space either. It's not defined by one space. What if you had a huge world and you could only battle one-on-one?
Okay, let me reword that then. A universe.
Huge universe with thousands of people, but you can only battle one-on-one.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for you to turn around and go, well, what if it was a multiverse? Just to be pedantic, but yeah. No, I see what you're trying, but as I say, I think, let's be logical about this in this day and age, an MMO is what it is. It doesn't matter how much you want to argue or redefine the definition. It is what it is. And, when you talk about genre of games, you always put, you wouldn't necessarily put the MMO beforehand if it didn't include a massively multiplayer online mode of some sort. So, in that respect, but, let's get back onto the topic rather than definitions. Katie.
Okay.
One thing I want to sort of explore is that, we sort of talked a little bit about some of the things we would like to see. Obviously, KD wants, to go retro and see a retro comeback. But but we talked about, the ones that are coming for console. What's interesting is that with all the demand for it, because, as we say, we do want more MMOs, but there's not quite that killer feature that sells us on it and says we must pour hundreds of hours into our PS3 just for that MMO. What's interesting is that obviously the Elder Scrolls is coming, which is a huge brand. We've all played an Elder Scrolls game at some point. We've all loved it. It's a fantastic RPG.
Give me Skyrim Online.
Even
MMO.
when it works, if it works on your PS3, they're great games to play. So what's interesting is that Bethesda, obviously, for them, in some respects, this is one of their first major MMOs. They can obviously see that a lot of people are bringing MMOs to console, and there's obviously a demand for it. And as new consoles are going to be coming, that are going to feature more on social and online connectivity and, bringing more interesting multiplayer components to go. It's interesting that, the Elder Scrolls Online has chosen to go PC only effectively. What do you guys think of that? Do you think that's a mistake by Bethesda? Do you think, if it had launched on console that, it could do the numbers that WoW's getting?
Yes. I think they can pull it off.
Care to expand on that? We are a podcast now.
Well, let's get Squill's opinion. Let's get Squill's opinion.
Looked at it, to be honest. I haven't really actually played any Elder Scrolls.
Have you not? Have you not played Skyrim?
I played about an hour of it and then sent it back to live film.
What?
Yeah.
You didn't like it?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Well, in fairness, KD, you can't hold it against him because you did the same with Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, I guess I'm too. I have this ingrained love too for all things like medieval, so I also like the armor, weapons, magic kind of. That harkens back to the D&D stuff, old school again. So I don't know. I probably take to those games a lot more than other things.
Sorry, just before we carry on with talking about the Elder Scrolls Online, I just want to look at some of the stuff that people are putting in the chat window here, because obviously we are having live chat here. Got a laugh. Even D. Harris said he'd actually love to see an MMO farming simulator. I'm not sure that would be my cup of tea, but fair play. It is thinking out the box a little. Could happen. I'm sure there is.
Sims. You're touching upon Sims there. I could see Sims doing something like
Sims is pretty much an MMO.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's an MMO. I mean, they could do a variety of different Sims. I mean, think about all those Sim games that were out with, roller coaster parks and
Train Tycoon.
I played a game called Sim Ants on the PC like gazillion years ago, where you simulated you were running like an ant colony.
Yeah. Well, if you want to laugh, my dad told me with great glee that he'd found an absolute gem in the game store the other day, which was simulating lumberjacks. And I thought, that's taking it a bit too far.
50 quid.
Farming, I can understand. Trains, I can understand. The Sims, I can understand.
It's very big in Canada.
Lumberjacking, I mean, come on. And he even said one of the features of
comes
the
with a free plaid shirt.
Yeah. He said one of the features that you could do was going to first person mode while chopping wood, and I just thought
first person wood chopping.
Exactly. So I think there's probably some games out there that should not even be made.
Limit that one to 1 hour of gameplay a month.
Disposal simulator.
Yeah. But could you imagine an MMO lumberjack though? You have one person cutting, who would then have one person collecting, the other person loading, the other person driving it off to the.
And occasionally a tree will fall on somebody and snap their back, and then they can spend the rest of the game in the hospital with
Yeah, it'd be like
debilitating injury.
a special MMO event where a tree falls on people, or there's a forest fire or
Look,
something.
it's first person in the hospital.
You know, as lumberjacks, you have to deal with the fire of the forest or something. I don't know. Just as I say, there are some games that shouldn't even be made, let alone be considered for an MMO. And it just goes to show that not everything does work with an MMO. I'm not sure what Demon D Harris says about Farm Simulator, because I kind of class Farmville as I guess you could call it as a social MMO farming game in that respect.
Indeed.
Clark's also, so anyway, we're going off a little bit here because I did want to just pick up on some of the things that were said in chat. Clark says he's looked at the Elder Scrolls MMO and he said it looks terrible, but in all fairness, you know, I don't know. I think it looks pretty good. I haven't really had chance.
Well, if it's on PC, I'm not going there again.
Well, again, it comes back to my original question: is you know, do you think Bethesda really have made a mistake and missed an opportunity there?
And PC gaming is, you know, for people that don't know, it's largely dead compared to consoles. And, you know, I mean, I can remember you have to buy like a graphics card update every 6 months and, you know update to the latest versions of Windows and socket this and all that other stuff. It's a pain in the butt to play games on a computer.
I have to
really
admit,
is.
I love the PC community in some respect, and I don't want to blanket sweep everybody here under the same thing, but what I love about it is that a lot of the PC community snub consoles because they're like, well, we don't want to pay $300-400 or £200-300 for something that, you know, only plays the current generation games when I can keep upgrading my system all the time. But then you look at the cost of the graphics cards every 6 months and you think, well, that's almost double the cost of what it costs you to get at least the benchmark units.
Yeah.
Ensure that, you know, every game that you play is effectively the benchmark of pushing graphics on it. So, you know, there's a lot of double standards within the PC community in some respects. I wonder if that's why it's dwindled a bit more. I wouldn't say it's completely.
It's lopsided too. It's lopsided too with the hacks and the cheats, but then also even just common things like the macros and stuff we were talking about. People can run programs, they can figure stuff out, they can run double instances of games and kill themselves, and, you know, stock up on extra equipment. There's just so many things. You know, PC it's got issues with that, and in so many areas that it's so lopsided that you know, really, if you're a PC gamer, you got to subject yourself to a lot more things that are just monkeys in the wrench that can throw it off from just being a fair, even playing field. And who doesn't like to just be able to stick a disc in and freaking play, even if you got a download or something to do? It's not.
Well, it's interesting you mention that because, as I say, you know, we're only really, in some respect, touching the surface of this all, because we are referring to essentially this generation of consoles. You know,
PS4
we're not even looking at the next generation of consoles, and, you know, from a PC perspective, you know, looking at things like the Steam box and stuff and that, and then obviously, you know, however powerful the next PS4, which, you know, all being well, might actually be announced on the 20th of February this month. But, you know, as you said, you know, things are going to push to streaming services, and you know, I do wonder if, you know, we're going to see that from MMOs as well.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see. I mean, as I say, you know, Bethesda haven't really been clear, you know, if there's any intention at all to bring the Elder Scrolls Online to consoles, if it's even a remote thought at the moment. But, you know, if they do, and, you know, in some respects, streaming could be the ideal option for them.
Mm-hmm.
Because then they don't have to, you know, they
plus if the
PS4
moves more closer to the PC, you know, in terms of, like, you know, it's more appropriate for people to have a keyboard, and they can actually surf and do things like that a lot more readily than they can now, then it'll also set that stage for more of that, for more PC type content to also come to console. So.
Do you reckon, Squill, you reckon it's all going to stream at some point?
It's all going to stream.
Probably, but I don't want it to.
Yeah, I have to admit I'm still very sceptical of the whole streaming thing. But
No, don't happen.
I don't know. We need our internets to be speed in the UK and Ireland respectively to just like be proper upped, really, because it's terrible here. Even Squill will agree with me on that.
Yeah.
The infrastructure.
Yeah, that's really the key. Is
rubbish.
the internet seems to be behind on all that.
Yeah, and it could end up.
I blame
missing
cable
out.
companies.
You know, getting off MMOs for a second and just, looking at some of the reported rumours of what, PS4 and Orbis might incorporate, with the ability to constantly record your gameplay in 15-minute segments and upload them to various social networks, etc., and, share with your friends there and then, and, editing on the fly without actually leaving the game itself, as much as I want a PS4 and Orbis, if it does do those things, I feel like I'm going to get kind of left out a little bit because, if I'm if those rumours are true and I can record gameplay while playing game and stuff and edit on the fly and then upload, how's that going to affect me when I'm actually playing an online multiplayer game like an MMO, because essentially that's I'm going to have to upload it and still have an online connection, so I think that's probably something that people probably haven't thought about, but maybe more relevant now in the next couple of weeks. So it's worth giving some thought about, I guess.
I don't know, but I think we determined today that the old school
we want MMOs.
MMORPGs were better.
We just don't know what we want. I think that's what we summed up.
Wants is Ultima Online.
Yeah.
Ultima Online.
We've established that KD wants Ultima Online and that we all want new MMOs and keep them coming. We just have no idea what we actually want from them. So
here's a funny thing to say about that. Ultima Online is actually free as well. There's a bunch of emulator type private server setups where you can download all the software and you can play and you just enjoy that game.
We should probably also point out that we've established that price isn't even an issue anyway with all of these as well.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. I didn't think that would be the case, but it seems to not matter whether you pay £10 a month or free. So
from my experience of WoW, price doesn't really matter if you're playing it all the time.
Yeah.
You get your money out of it.
I think even if you're putting like 20 hours a month in or something, you still effectively, when you look at the subscription base, it's what, £10 a month now. So that's what.
And you probably get better. You probably get more value out of that than probably buying most video games.
Yeah.
You buy a brand new $60 video game and play it for a couple hours and beat it and throw it away or sell it or whatever. You're not.
So
I'd rather be on a subscription service that I can quit any time when I get bored of it and.
I'd be inclined to agree with you if you're talking about A, Activision games, and B, Bethesda games that don't work. I think you definitely get more value with an MMO. Yeah, sucker punch them there, and rightly so, they deserve it. But yeah, interesting that price isn't even an issue. So I guess it's really down to the producers, really, which is I think maybe they need to reach out more to people and really get to the bottom of that before they actually, because it's always interesting with the development cycle. You end up producing a product, then you focus test it. Maybe they need to focus test it before developing a product.
Yeah,
that may be the way to go forward.
Okie dokie.
So that pretty much wraps it all up, doesn't it?
What do you think, Squill? Any final comments?
Well, I'm still looking forward to Final Fantasy 14.
Yeah, I'll be with you on that, buddy. I'm definitely going to be picking it up.
I might try it. Who knows? You might
convince me. Well.
We'll all be wrapped up in it. We'll all be wrapped up in it for years and years and never play another PS3 game.
Well, I'll tell you what, KD. When I get my PS4 and I stick Final Fantasy 14 backwards compatible in the disc tray, I'll send you a video clip. See if that sells you on it. Anything we should probably add? Predictions for Super Bowl tonight? Ravens or 49ers?
I don't know.
I don't even follow it, so I'm just going to go Ravens.
I'm not going to throw a prediction.
Squills with the Ravens. You're not going to predict at all?
No, I'm
Just pick
opting out.
Pick one. Go on.
I'll just watch it and see.
All right. Well,
I think Ultima Online's going to win.
Never. Well, Squill's going to go with the Ravens. I'm going to say the 49ers, to be honest. I've heard good things about them this season, even though I haven't watched as much NFL as I intended to do this year. So I'm going to go with the 49ers. I think it's about time they probably won one, so.
Podcast poll. Should we ask him if I'm right?
No, because it lasts like 12 hours. It'd be the shortest poll that we've ever done. So, but yeah, no, it'd be interesting to come back on next week's podcast and see which one of us predicted the right Super Bowl outcome.
Oh, I don't know. I was wondering if there was something related to MMOs we should ask as a podcast poll. If you want to pose what we're gonna ask.
I'm not going to say on air. I need to think about it.
Yeah, think about it. All right.
Yeah. So I'll have a think and see what can be discussed during the week. Do we have a topic for next week's show? Maybe
I don't
we
know
should
that we do.
Our esteemed guest, Squill. Any ideas on what you'd like to hear us talking rubbish about next week? Or
I was wondering when you're going to get Clark on.
Yeah, well, he's
we'll have a Where's Clark.
He's in the chat if he's still listening.
We'll have a Where's Clark's episode where we just speculate for 2 hours where he might be, why he's not there, why he stood us up, whatever.
But I'll publish my phone number and people can ring us live during the show or something.
There you go. Yeah, we'll just keep calling him every couple minutes. Say, what are you doing now? We need an update. What are you doing now?
Yeah. But seriously, we need a topic for next week.
All right. Well, we'll think about it.
Yeah.
We're never at a loss for that. We get there. We'll find something.
Yeah, we'll leave it as a mystery. If anyone wants to PM me, or you can email me now on the new email address, which is social@TrophiesonPSN.com. So if anybody has any suggestions for a topic for next week before we put the podcast post up on a Tuesday, do let us know. And I'll be more than welcome to entertain those ideas.
Cool beans. Well, Squill, sir, thank you for joining us.
Amen to that. Yeah, it's been good, buddy. Thank you for doing all the extra research as well. That was much appreciated.
Indeed.
No problem.
We'll definitely have to have you back the next time we talk more about MMOs, so if KD ever lets us again, because it's not Ultima, so...
Yeah. Next topic will be Ultima Online.
Yeah.
No,
never in
seriously.
my lifetime.
But say goodbye, gentlemen. And everyone, thank you for joining us. And hopefully you'll sign my petition to get MMO redefined. And
petition for Ultima Online onto console.
Yes, and get Ultima Online onto PS3. Both those petitions, sign them, and we'll send them out as soon as we get our minimum number of signatures.
What's it for Americans? 50,000? You can send it to the White House?
I'll sign my name 50,000 times. I don't care.
Yeah. It works with a Death Star.
All right, folks. Until next week, thank you for joining us. This has been the PodStation from Trophies on PSN. We'll catch you next week.